Okay, welcome back, guys. So this is part 2 of the Realflow to Houdini tag team tutorial. This is going to primarily focus on Houdini. We're going to be creating bubbles. We're going to be transferring colors from the Realflow particles onto our bricks, which we'll also create in Houdini. We're basically going to come up with the setup that's going to make it render ready. So before we move forward, if you look on your screen carefully, you'll notice that the mesh I have animating looks a little bit different from the one we finished on in the last part of the tutorial, the first part of the tutorial. So I wanted to basically let you guys, I basically worked on it a little bit more. So I wanted to let you guys know some of the settings that I changed, so you can probably, if you want to mimic them bit for bit, you can. Or if you want to keep on with what you already did, that's going to be just fine too. So let's stop this preview. Here we are in Realflow. If you go to the domain and go to the domain tab, you're going to, under the resolution, you're going to see I changed that to 4000. I changed the internal pressure to 0.5. I changed the external pressure to 0.03. And then on the particle mesh, yes, under the mesh tab, I changed the polygon size to 0.003. I changed the domain radius to 0.0125. And again, back on the particle mesh VDB, on the smoothing tab, on the smooth, I switched the iterations to 20. And on the mesh filter, the thinning was set to 0.4. Think that's about it. On surface tension 2, the daemon tab, I set the strength to 25. I'm not sure if that's what it was the last time, but yeah, that's what it is right now. So you can mimic these settings, you can rewind and check them out again and then see if they work out for you. But bear in mind that on the domain, when I set the resolution to 4000, the particle count went up to 996,000, and I think the previous one was about 300 and something thousand. So just make a mental note of that, just in case. I hope your machine will be able to handle it. It's not too much, but also it's not too little. So let's move into Houdini. So what we're going to do in Houdini, we're going to work in stages. The first thing we're going to do is basically get the particles as they were into Houdini. And then we're going to try and get a visualization similar to what we have in Realflow. Let me give you an example. Here, what we have here on the domain, we're going to try and have an example of this, where we have the blues and the whites based on velocity. So let's get started on that. First thing I'm going to do is create a geonode. Again, I'm not really going to go into explaining much of what I'm doing in Houdini in depth. It's also expected to be that you are probably good with the interface, understand the node structure. The most I can ask is, let's say if I open up a node that you don't understand, you could always go to, when you have the node highlighted, you could always go to the question mark that's on the geometry parameters. It's for the help icon. If you click on that, it always gives you a help option that gives you a bit of a guide into what that node does. But still, I'll take questions in the comment section. It will be easier for me to answer questions than for me to explain what I'm doing here in detail. So we've made a geonode. This is going to be where we're going to set everything up. So we're going to call it setup. We dive into it. So the first thing we're going to do is have an alembic node that is going to import the alembic meshes and particles that we created in Realflow. So click on alembic, have it there. It just has a box, so we click on the picker. We go to where we had our Realflow, project file. And then let's start with the particles. The alembic, if they show up like this, just click on show sequences as one entry and it'll do that. So click on that, accept. And voila, we have something quite similar to something we've seen before. Yeah, remember that? Cool. Also, we need to change the timeline settings because we are at 120 frames per second. So let's match that. And we are at 200 frames. So we're going to apply that. Okay, so now the timelines are pretty much the same. So this is cool. But what we want to do is have this, the same color. So first thing we're going to do, if you mouse over, I'm using Houdini 18.0348. If you mouse over, you should get these icons. We have an information icon here that you can click and have an information bar, floating bar that's going to show up. Otherwise, you can just middle mouse over the node, and you'll get that information. When you let go of the middle mouse, it's going to vanish. I'll use the information just for the sake of the tutorial. So when you click on that, you'll see that this alembic setup is indicating some very unusual things. First of all, it's saying that there's only one point, there's only one primitive, one vertex, and one packed alembic. The last one is the most important. The first couple of you are a bit confusing because obviously we have more than one point. But the fact that this is a packed alembic means Houdini is optimizing it so that it can be easy to read and give less strain on the, for example, CPU. But we don't need that. We need to have everything unpacked. So you remember we rendered out, we cached out the particle simulation with a few attributes. We had IDs, we had velocities, we had so many other things. But when you look at this, it doesn't show any of that. That's because they're all packed. That's why you're seeing it's indicated as a packed alembic. So what we're going to do is going to right click and pick the unpack node. Put that down. When you highlight that and you mouse over it, now something interesting happens. Let's use the information icon. Now look at that. We have 900,000 points plus. We have 9-point attributes: age, density, emitter ID, force, and all that other stuff. That's because it's all been extracted through this unpacking from the alembic node that was packed. All right, so now what we're going to do is, as you can see, everything is cool. If you look at the geometry spreadsheet, you're going to see all those attributes are also there: ID, force, neighbors, texture, velocity, density, age. And you can use this for very many things. In our particular case, what we're going to do is we're going to use only the velocity in this particular instance, just to extract the colors and or basically have values that we can use for the colors. So we're going to plug in a very interesting node. This node is called the particle fluid surface. When you click on that, bring it to the bottom, first thing you're going to notice is, check that out. You can actually mesh a Realflow particle sim in Houdini. So these couple of settings are pretty much a match up to what you have in Realflow for the particle VDB meshing. It's just that now in its Houdini native state, and now you'd have to figure out how to do this for Houdini, but you can do it in Houdini. You can actually mesh in Houdini directly from Realflow. Well, that's not what we need. What we need is the particles themselves with the same properties that it's come with. So first, what we're going to do is go to the output section here, and under the convert to, we're going to click on the drop down arrow. It's currently set to surface polygon soup. We're going to click it and select particles, and we get our particles back. But still, that's not what we want. So we're going to go to the visualize, because it's currently not having any form of visualization. If you click on the drop down, which is set to none, we have velocity. And you remember we exported velocity. So when you click on velocity, we have something quite similar to what we had on Realflow in our domain display. Look at that, particle range color. Now in Houdini, what we have is the velocity ramp, which is pretty much the particle range color. So I'm just going to add one more marker and bring this back down here. I'll probably set them around there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the colors from the Realflow range colors and bring them into Houdini. So give me a second while I do that. I'll just copy each onto each, right? So let's start with this one. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to crush the colors a bit more, kind of get us to that look. And then I'm going to reduce a bit of the brightness of the value of each color, because Houdini is a bit different in terms of its range slider from Realflows. I think that's fine. So now you're going to notice we have that, which is really nice. So we have the velocity representation in the color, and this color is what we're going to use for the bricks. If you remember the video, we actually have velocity representation also in the bricks. You see that? See the whites where it's really fast, and it gets a little bit darker where it's really low. Cool. So that's done. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start housekeeping. So I'll hit Shift S so that the nodes can take on the curved shape. I like that. And then I'm going to add a null. And I'm just going to call this color extract. I'm going to make the null black. I like black. And then I'm going to, this is called a network box. So I'm going to create a network box for it. I'll give it a yellow color. Oops, sorry, not the nodes, the box itself. Actually green. And just, sorry, disconnected that. And call it color extract. Okay, cool. So now that we have the color extract, the next thing we're going to do is create bubbles. Yeah. So we're going to unpack again, because we need the particles not as a single point, but as quite a number of particles, so that we can get a percentage of them to delete, a random percentage. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to connect an attribute wrangle. Now I'm going to type in some code. I will explain as much as I can, but it's not going to be much. I'm pretty much a noob in Houdini, so most of this happens for me inside my head. It works. So I'll just try and explain it as best as I can. So what we want to do is delete a percentage of the particles based on their IDs, these numbers right here. If you see, we have IDs from 1 to 998,000, basically counting each particle. We want to do this based on IDs because IDs are a constant. They never change. Whether a particle lives or dies, IDs always stay the same. So that's why we're going to use that. So we're going to create a conditional statement, and in that statement we're going to say that if, open and close brackets, a random selection of the IDs is less than channel float. I'm creating a channel for a percentage. We're going to call this percentage cutoff. If a random selection of the IDs, of a random selection of the points by IDs is less than the cutoff we're going to stipulate in this channel we're going to create, then Houdini needs to do this. It needs to remove point based on this node 0, this geo handle, this one, for each point. PTNum, that's point number. So if a random point based on its ID is less than this channel cutoff, we're going to remove that point based on the particle number. So what we're going to do is click this spare parameter icon. It's going to create the cutoff. Now this is what we were creating. That's why we said channel, and we said float because it can be 0.1. Yeah. So that's what we've created. Now, if you look at just look at the viewport and zoom in a bit. I don't know if it's going to make sense. Let me switch these on. It'll make more sense with this. So the cutoff, as we increase cutoff, this is a percentage. So like in this case, I've taken out 10%, 20%, 30%, 40, 50, 60. You're noticing they're reducing. And this is randomly reducing, which is really cool. Part of the best part about Houdini. So I'm going to set it to 9%. Switch off the highlight. And then mouse over. You'll see that we have 10,000 points, while originally we had 998,000. So I've taken out possibly 99% of the particles or the points that were originally there, and I've done this randomly, which is really cool. So the next thing we need to do is create the spheres that are going to be representative of bubbles that we're going to attach to each of these points. So let's set up spheres, a sphere. Then we're going to add a transform node because it's probably going to be too big. And then we're going to add a copy to points. So the copy to points connects directly to the object you want to copy on the left and the points you want to copy them to on the right. So the points are here on the attribute triangle. So connect that. Then, those are massive, huge. So we're going to come to the transform and let's say 0.001. Zoom in again. Oh, that's too small. So let's say 2 or 3. Fine. That's cool. But then these particles pretty much look the same. They're all the same size, and bubbles don't behave like that. Yeah, we might be faking it here, but bubbles still don't look like that. At least they usually have randomized scales. So in this particular instance, I'm just going to use a node that comes in straight out of Houdini called the attribute randomize. Connect that. It gives it random colors because it's randomizing color, CD. But what we want it to randomize is p scale, particle scale, point scale also, so to speak. So type in p scale in the attribute name, and look at that. Now we have very, very randomized points. I'm probably gonna switch the max value to 2. And then come back to the transform and change this to 0.002, which is fine. I think I'll reduce the percentage by another 0.5%, which is cool. That's better. I like that. Okay. Then, now that we've used the attribute randomize, what we need to notice is that this randomization is taking place based on the point number, otherwise known as the PT_num. You remember we avoided using the PT_num in selection here. We used an ID because PT_num changes based on life. So if a particle's life exceeds a certain point and you're using PT_num and it vanishes, it would cause jitters. So I'm going to show you an example of that. Right now we have this. Let's go to the dark background and change it to the dark mode. Be easier to visualize. Switch off the grid, and then I'm going to come to the what you call it, the flip book. Yeah, I'm so used to saying play blast because of Maya, so it's called a flip book. So right click on it, go to flip book with new settings. For me to get a high quality flip book, what I do is I go to the size tab, switch off the resolution so it takes the native resolution it's looking at. On the effects, I go to the anti-alias and use high quality AA. So let's just start that up and see what happens. Cool, and that's finished. If we play back, it's going really fast. That's because of our frame rate. Just come down to this number here. That's the frame rate. Change it to 25 frames per second so that the playback is slower. Now when you play it, that looks kind of nice. But if you really look carefully, you're going to notice quite a bit of jittering. You're going to notice some particles vanishing and appearing, some kind of clicks and pops. It's not really smooth. Now that's where that's why I was bringing us back to the attribute randomize, because the attribute randomize was working based off of the pt num point number. That jitter is going to happen because that pt num keeps changing. So what we need to do is go to the options tab of the randomize attribute node, and under at the bottom completely you see something called seed attribute, and it's grayed out. When you click on it, it tells you what to use as a seed. You can always enter what you want to use here. In this case, id is already preset, and that's what we wanted to use anyway, so we leave it at that and then go back. Then now if we do this preview again, let's see what happens. Okay, there we go. Let's change the frame rate again to 25 so that the playback is normal. Let's play back, and look at that. Now that's smooth, really smooth. Now look at the beauty of this is the beauty of Houdini now for me anyway. It's the randomized selection gives the illusion that the particles are actually just dancing around the fluid, but it's just because of the fact that they're randomized gives it that beautiful look. So it actually feels like they're playing around inside the fluid, independent of the fluid itself. And this is amazing. So that's done. We're going to do a bit of housekeeping again. I'm a bit of a clean freak, so we're going to come over here. We're going to also give this a null, and we're going to call it bubbles out. Then let's set this up nicely, so you stay there and there. I like my nodes nice and neat. And plus, if another artist has to work with my nodes, I would love to give them some peace of mind. Okay, and then we put these in a network box also. It's Control O. No, is it? No, it's not Control O. It's mouse over Shift O. Yeah, Shift O, and we have a network box. Okay, cool. So I'll call this bubbles creation, and I'll give it a blue color. Cool stuff. And we have just finished our bubbles. Okay, now what we want to do now is to create the fluid. First of all, let's rename this. I'll just call it Diverso Particle Cache, just to keep things clear, because I'm going to have another one too. So let's bring in another Alembic node. Alembic, yeah, there you go. And this one is going to be the Diverso Mesh Cache. Okay, so let's Control B back into this. So this is what we have here. Let me bring the grid just to guide my eyes. Okay, so in the Diverso, in the Alembic, we're going to pick, we'll go back and pick the mesh itself, particle mesh. There's our lovely, lovely fluid. There you go. Nice. I love this shot. I love this frame anyway. Okay. What we're going to create here, first of all, is going to be very easy. So we're just going to output to a null. We're going to call this null fluid out fluid. Call it black. And that's set because we already created the fluid in Realflow, the mesh in Realflow. Now, what we want to do is create the setup for the bricks. We're going to do the setup for the bricks straight from the same mesh, the beauty of proceduralism again. What we need is something that is going to create points from the volume that we already have, this volume. And oddly enough, it's called a points from volume. Gotta love Houdini, guys. All right, connect that, and this is what we're going to get. It's a bit difficult to figure out what's happening here. So what we're going to do is I'm going to add a null, and I'm going to call that null out bricks. Give it a black color, highlight it there. It gives at least a better visualization. I think this is a viewport issue. Let's just click in and out, and there we go. They are our points. All right, let's highlight them. Let me go back to the light viewport. It's much better to take a look at these guys. You can see the points from volume is a very interesting node. So what it does is it creates points like in this particular configuration. It's creating them in a grid configuration, and in a grid configuration what happens is the points are equally and evenly spaced based on this point separation number. So in this case they're 0.1 units, if I can say so, separate from each other. And this particular value for the point separation is what we're going to use to create our pixelated distance. So first things first, we are going to create the pixels themselves. Type in box, bring the box in, add a transform node. That's to scale it after the fact, just in case it's too big. Then we're going to do the copy to points node. Basically what we want to copy goes to the left, and where we're going to copy it to goes to the right. And where are we copying this to the points from volume. So connect those two, then highlight the copy to points node. Huge boxes. That's not exactly what we want to see, but it's a start. So what's happening is that we've taken the box in its native state, its size, its normal scale, and basically copied it on across to every single point that was on these points from volume. And you can see they're massive. So this is where the points from point separation comes in. This value can be used as a length, width, and height distance for the boxes to create an exact and proper fit. So let's copy this parameter. Just right click, copy parameter, then go to the transform we created for the box, and on the uniform scale just paste it as a relative reference. So what it's going to do is basically it's going to reference every single time, every single value that comes from this point separation is going to be in this uniform scale. And you see what happens. So now if you click on the uniform scale, you notice it's at 0.1, same as the point separation. If I change it to 0.05, the boxes increase because the point separation has become smaller. The uniform scale also changes. Also, you're noticing that it's kind of like a resolution bar of sorts. So we're getting a better resolution every time we reduce the point separation. Let's say 0.3. 0.1. Fantastic. Now, if we want to see exactly what's happened here, look at this. That's the original fluid. You can see the outline of the bricks on top of it. It's pretty much matched it to come up with this look. We're having a bit of an issue with the normal, so what we're going to do is going to add a normal node, and it's going to bring back the normals the way they're meant to be. Now you can see the bricks look all nice and properly laid out. So what are we going to do next? Remember, we made something called a color extract. This is where we wanted to bring in the colors and have the bricks pick up on the color of the fluid based on its velocity. Yeah, cool. So what we're going to do is how we're going to do that is this. We're going to transfer the color attribute from the extract and bring it into the cube. So the cubes are basically flat. The color extract is not. Let me switch that on. You see? It's a nice way for you to see how the bricks have actually overlaid on the seam itself. See that? So what we're going to use is called, oddly enough, an attribute transfer. So what we're going to have on the left, if you mouse over, you're going to see it tells you the required geometry to transfer attributes to. And we want to transfer attributes from the color extract to the bricks. So the 2 is the bricks. Then the other node is going to be the color extract. Cool. Now if we highlight the attribute transfer, now look at that. That's much more interesting than what we were seeing before. Only thing that we have right now is that the colors are interpolated across the points. So each brick does not have its own unique spectrum of color. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the format in which the bricks have the color transfer. Currently the bricks have them in point mode. We want them to be in primitive mode. So what we need to do is promote the attributes or upgrade the attributes from the points to the primitives. So what we're going to do is use a node called attribute promote. Houdini rocks. So what we want to promote is, we're going to come to original name. We need to promote the CD, that's the color, promote it from the original class, which is the point, and promote it to a new class. And please look at the viewport to primitive. When I click on that, see what happened? Let me switch that back again. You see that? The colors are interpolating across the points. Now, with primitive, it's very specific. Each box has its own unique resolution, like like what you call it, like LED screens, where you have each LED has a specific spectrum of color. That's cool. All right, now that we've done that, we are going to housekeep again. We have basically finalized our brick portion. So let me just lay it out nicely. Transform bar. Okay. Bring the null. Now we connect it to the end of the node tree. So we're not done with the bricks. We're not done with the bricks yet. Another thing we need to do is, or I needed to do for my own artistic preference, was to have designated lines over. Right now you're seeing this thing you're seeing the viewport in this mode, smooth wire shaded. If I put it to smooth shaded, this is kind of what you would render. Kind of an idea of what the render would look like. So what I needed to do was to make sure that there was a bit of a contrast so that you could tell that it was bricks. So what I did was I created outlines that would envelope each brick separately and give it a unique space in its own. So we're going to do that right now. Just come to the object setup, then type in line, and then you're going to see a node called convert line. Pick that node. You're going to connect that node to the normal just before the attribute transfer, because we're going to give this one a color of its own. So connect that, then highlight it, then you'll see what's happening. Oh wow, cool. So each brick has been given an outline and it's white. So right now, if we merge or combine the bricks, so merge, connect that there and connect that there, and bring this down here and put them all together. Now look at that. Remember, we're in smooth shaded. If we go back to without the outlines, you can see it's very hard to tell what's going on. And this is, for me, I felt that this was going to be a really neat way of highlighting that these are actually bricks. So there you go. We're going to basically during the rendering stage, which is going to be part 3 of this tutorial, the final part, we're going to highlight how to change the colors and the size of these, because lines have a very different way of rendering. So I'll show you all that on the third part, but this is basically what I was going for. We could actually even just go over and add a color node just for the sake of the viewport, and then give that color node a nice black tint. And you'll notice now over the old original bricks, you can at least tell that these are bricks, you know. But I'm going to take that out and take us back to our original nice shaded look. Cool, I like this. Just in case you may be in doubt about this, first of all, let's housekeep first. Let's housekeep, you know, the Swahili factory way. So let's have that. We have that whole setup. Check these guys. It was supposed to be Shift O, yeah, and we have the network. We're gonna call this bricks creation. Then we're going to take the fluid 2 and we're going to shift O and we're going to say fluid. Yeah. Then we're going to do one last thing as we finalize this setup. We're going to give materials to each of these guys. So I'm going to add a material node right here. And then I'm going to add a material node right here and another one right here for the bricks and a separate one for the lines. Let's name them bubbles mat, fluid mat, bricks mat, and lines mat. Okay, so we have that. We have this setup. We have this setup. Let's give them some cool colors. Yellow and yeah, cool, nice. Last but not least, we're going to create the globe or the orb. So just type in sphere, add a transform node to it. And then we're gonna go back to our viewport so that we can see exactly what we're doing. You can see the sphere is massive. I'm gonna set the viewport back to smooth wire shaded. And then I'm going to highlight the bricks as the main thing and then have that as a template so we can see the outline. I don't know if you can see the outline. If you can't, let's just go to dark. You can see the sphere outline. So I'm going to scale it down. I think there's just a second. Okay. Viewport issues again. I don't know why this happens, but it does. Let's select the bricks again, see what happens. We've lost our bricks. Oh, there they are. Okay, cool. Template this guy. See how big he is, and I think that's a cool enough size for the sphere. Add a material node to it and a null. We call this orb out. Black. Shift O, network, and call this orb creation. Cool. Let's go back to our housekeeping thingy and give this purple color. Nice. So what we've essentially done, if we go back in the setup, is we first of all created our fluid with the color to extract and use. Then we created our bubbles. So cool. I love the bubbles. And then we created the fluid. There you go. Then we created our awesome bricks. And then we created our orb. We gave each of them a material. So now what we're going to do is we're going to break this down, because when you're rendering things like, for example, because we're going to be using Arnold, things like transparency need have a tab. If you go to the setup here, we can see that in the Arnold tab we have a visibility option and the opaque marker has been checked. When you're doing transparent stuff, we need to uncheck it. Now we can't do that for everything here because not everything is going to be opaque. So we're going to split out. The reason we actually put nulls on each of them is so that we could split them out and bring them into different separate nodes and have unique settings for each of them. So what we generally do is, say for example, have a geo node. We're going to have one for, we're going to call this bubbles. We duplicate that. Then we're going to call this bricks. Duplicate that, and then for this we're going to have orb. how we're going to bring those in. We're going to use an object merge. An object merge basically just looks for an object from another node and brings it into this node, references it, but you can use it separately. So we're going to go to the setup. We have the setup, remember, and we want bubbles for this one. So we need to look for the out bubbles we created, which I can't see. Oh, here you go, bubbles out. There you go. Let me switch this off so that you can see for yourself. Now we have this node that is exclusively bubbles. If I toggle it on and off, you can see that off again. So let's go in here. Let's do object merge again. Here we're going to pick in the bricks. There you go. Then we're going to pick in here. We're going to take the orb out. Yeah, cool. Oh, we have one more that's missing. That's the fluid. So we need fluid. Switch this off, switch this on, and change that to out fluid. There you go. Housekeeping. And the bricks and the orb. So now everything is pretty much set up and we are ready to go into the render session. Now that's going to be the next lesson, and I honestly hope you enjoyed going through Houdini. It wasn't very technical. I hope I hope it was fun looking at the way Houdini can be very dynamic in its proceduralism and how we can get so much out of just two pieces of information. So there we go. I'll see you guys next week for part 3, the final part of this tutorial, where we will do rendering. I'm going to be working with Arnold, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thank you so much to the Houdini community for their help also in getting me to learn a lot of this stuff. Okay, see you guys on the next episode. Bye.